Today is the release day for deadmau5 Here's the Drop. What kind of images would you associate with your sound? Drone, Tony, Link, Keys, Miles, Darktronica Drive, Ferrari, Jimmy, UFC, Summer, Plastic, Perfect and Helicopter. When the big boys like them start going Linux, then maybe others will follow suit. What is your favourite sci-fi TV show? Is it the responsibility of the producer to EQ or process the sounds before adding the reverb or effects that are baked in? Are you aware of Audius? Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply, comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video answering your questions. Before I look at last week's video, is there any house admin? Yes, there is. Today is the release day for deadmau5 Here's the Drop, which is the remix album to Where's the Drop. So if you are into that album, or actually if you're not into that album, you might like this one. So for those of you that don't know, I can't imagine there's anyone watching this that doesn't know, but Where's the Drop was orchestral overtures of deadmau5 tracks, and obviously called Where's the Drop because there wasn't a drop. Now there's a remix album that has been put together by a bunch of mousetrap artists called Here's the Drop, and I am one of those artists that did a remix, and I was lucky enough to get track 14 Caritas, which was a fluid BPM of approximately 48 BPM. So yeah, not an easy track to remix, but hey, I like a challenge and I think I got there. So yeah, please do let me know your thoughts. By the time you're watching this video, it should be available and I should have a link for you below this video. What else is there? House admin. A couple of things going on the Patreon site. If you aren't a subscriber of my Patreon, not a problem, but if you are, then click on the link, and if you want to be, then click on the link below this video. I'm doing a few things for that at the minute. I'm just starting to put together some ideas for the Hackintosh series, so I'll be doing that exclusively for Patreon stuff, just because I'm using the budget from Patreon to build a Hackintosh basically, and I'm going to try and do a continuous new series. So right now it'll be on the Hackintosh, next maybe, I don't know, modular synths, something like that, and basically whatever the budget is in the Patreon, it just goes on to whatever for that series. So that's kind of the idea I've got at the moment. Podcast wise, we're getting closer and closer to filming stuff. I've basically secured all the equipment I need to get the pilots done at least, and I've now found a location that I can use as a bit of a fallback, because there's not enough room here to film them, and I'm probably going to need to travel for them anyway, starting next week after next, where I'll be going to Amsterdam, and I've already secured 2 episodes there, so watch this space. What else? I think that is it for now. Yeah, so let's have a look at last week's video and see the questions. Starting at the top, Mano Sling. Hi Dom, I have a suggestion. Could you ever make a series based on giving our music feedback or something in that vein? So I do keep getting asked this, and my normal response is kind of a no, because I can't do it on YouTube. because of copyright strikes. So if, for example, you were to send me a track and I was to listen to it on one of these videos, I'm broadcasting your music, and even though it may not be copyrighted or you may give me permission, 6 months later that track might be signed to a record label, and in which case I get the copyright strike, and then that video gets taken down and blah 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 blah. So it's kind of tricky to do that. I've also made it clear before that I am a pro member of audiu.net, where I do paid reviews and feedback, and I kind of wouldn't want to tread on the toes of them. However, I was thinking maybe at some point I can do this in the Facebook group. I was thinking what I might do is just drop a post on there saying give me your SoundCloud links in the comments below, and at some point I'll give a basic sort of bit of feedback, nothing spectacular, because I'm not going to go crazy in depth, spending hours on everyone's music, because nobody has time for that. So I'm thinking if this is up your street, then head to the Facebook Dom Kane producer group, where I may or may not post asking for your music soon. Watch this space. FanFan87, Helicopter, high five. If you had your own concert/show with LED walls, for example, what kind of visuals would you like to show? What kind of images would you associate with your sound? I don't know. So I nearly set up a live show 3 or 4 years ago with a good friend of mine. We had written a few tracks. We were looking at performing them live. He's a multi-instrumentalist, so it was doable. We even went as far as designing a geodesic dome of LED lights and learning some of the software to control these lights and to create basic patterns in the LED walls. And then we even went as far as going to a massive warehouse owned by a company that supply like TV shows like The X Factor and stuff like that with their LED walls, and we went and tested some walls there and got some prices. So we were very, very close to actually doing a thing, and then we opted out of it for various reasons. And during that time, I felt like geometric shapes was really what I wanted my visuals to be. So I can't really explain it too well because I'm not good at visual stuff, but I kind of felt like I wanted it to be quite hypnotic, I suppose. But on that note, one of the things that kind of put me off was, aside from the sheer cost of getting these things built, I mean, it was crazy money. We were looking at getting funding and whatever for it. But aside from the cost, I always kind of struggle with the fact that these LED wall type things are almost a distraction to the music. And I'm always kind of torn. There's a part of me that really appreciates and respects all these big artists that are doing these huge light shows, and that's fantastic. But at the same time, for me personally, I kind of like, a club like Fabric in London where they barely have any lighting, or they used to barely have any lighting. It was quite dark and dingy, and it was just about the music until whatever ungodly hour in the morning. And I kind of always liked that as well. For my music, though, I really don't know. I don't know where I stand anymore. So yeah, we'll see, I guess. I think it's one of those things that, if you look at people like deadmau5 or Feed Me or Eric Prydz, a lot of them are pretty good with graphic. Certainly deadmau5 and certainly Feed Me. Both of them are artists in visual ways as well as musical, and I think for them it suits them, it suits their thing. They have their brand. I don't have a brand, I don't have a logo, I'm not a visual person, I'm not able to draw stuff, so I'm barely able to imagine stuff, let alone draw it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I associate anything to my sound. I guess maybe I think of stories and I see them as cinematic experiences in my head, I suppose. So, and that doesn't really transfer to visuals on LED walls, I don't think. So I think it's just a different environment. I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough. But there we go, that answers that. Cavique. Hi Dom, been out of the loop for a while, but currently stuck in bed recovering from surgery. So I've now got plenty of time to catch up on AMAs. Well, I hope that the surgery wasn't too serious, and I hope that you make a good recovery. On that note, Drone, Tony, Link, Keys, Miles, Darktronica Drive, Ferrari, Jimmy, UFC, Summer, Plastic, Perfect, and Helicopter. Well, in which case, high five, 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 and high five. As ever, I've learned plenty from my marathon AMA catch-up. Uttered an audible yelp at your big news. Huge congratulations to you both, thank you. Had many thoughts provoked and participated in several one-person ovations in response to your rants. So, to business, a comment and a question. The comment relates to AMA 66-bit on Linux. As a long-term Linux user, I'd love nothing more than to use it full-time for audio work, but I completely agree with your conclusion that it's still not up to snuff, even after all these years. There are now plenty of DAW host applications, Bitwig of course, Mixbus 32C, Reaper, Traction, Audacity, etc. But the stuff in front and behind is sorely lacking. You already pointed out the lack of plugins, UE, Overtone, DSP, TAL, and a handful of others aside, but frankly the audio architecture on Linux is a mess as well. Jack has its uses, but the process of getting Mixbus to output audio is so convoluted. By the time that that's working, any creative impulse has been lost. It's a shame because the performance, plus 30-40% over Windows 10, and stability gains from Linux could make it extremely useful for pro audio. Yes, 100%, and I think you've covered it better than I could have ever covered it, really. Like we've talked about Linux before, where Bitwig, when Bitwig first announced that it was going to be Linux compatible, I felt like the whole music industry were jumping up and down with joy, and I think this is a byproduct of the music industry being somewhat fashion based, because I've noticed that a lot of people in the music industry proclaim to be nerds, and they proclaim to be big fans of Linux, and I don't know if they've ever used Linux, and they probably wouldn't know what something as simple as Ubuntu is. So I feel like when Bitwig was announced as being Linux compatible, the music world stood up and went, yay, fantastic, that's great for us nerds. And yet the reality is that no one really cared that much. That's my personal opinion, that's how I feel. I don't know if that's true or not. But the downside of that means that the devs never really got the pressure put on them to create Linux versions. So, I think until bigger companies like Native Instruments, I don't know if they're Linux compatible. I don't think they are. I'm fairly sure it's just Windows and Mac for Native Instruments. But when the big boys like them start going Linux, then maybe others will follow suit. I think it's interesting at the minute. We've been having this whole ongoing chat amongst, I don't even know how many AMAs, where we've talked about Hackintoshes and the way that Apple seem to be kind of cornering their own customers, certainly in the music industry, and sort of squeezing them out, basically. I think that, that's going to come to a head at some point, and it'll be interesting to see if maybe if the combination lock turns in the right places at the right time, we could have a big dev like Native Instruments offering Linux versions, and if we have a decent Linux build of an OS of some sort that offers good audio compatibility, if that combination happens at the right time, there could be a lot of Apple consumers jumping ship to Linux. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, there we go. The question is completely off topic. You've mentioned your favourite films, no arguments from me. But what is your favourite sci-fi TV show, and which sci-fi films have most inspired you, specifically because of the score and sound design? Favourite sci-fi TV show? I mean, I think it's probably a bit obvious, but Stranger Things right now has just blown my mind in what TV can do. Yeah, it's just been... I mean, I'm definitely the demographic. I'm in my mid to late 30s, so I was a kid in the 80s, so there's all of that nostalgia. For me personally, I lived in a small country area, much like the small town type mentality they have in Stranger Things, albeit an American version. Just everything about Stranger Things it's like the writers sat down and went, let's create a TV show for Dom, and let's just make it all about him and his life, and let's make it relatable to him and all of his loves and TV shows, all of the music, all of the score, the sound design, the acting, just everything about it is to me just perfect. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I've always kind of struggled with TV shows when it's a series that's sci-fi. I liked BSG, but it wasn't great, and I kind of missed the boat on the first run of that. Star Trek I always watched. I don't think I was a massive fan of Star Trek, though. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I was properly into it. I'm struggling to even think of any other sci-fi series, to be honest. Yeah, so I'm gonna stick with Stranger Things. In terms of sci-fi films have most inspired me, specifically because of the score and sound design, again, I'm answering it on the first one that jumps to my mind, because, let's be honest, it's an impossible question to answer, really. I'm going to go with Interstellar. Do you know what? Right, so I'll start on Interstellar. Interstellar, I felt like the score just was utterly inspiring because it shouldn't work. You're dealing with a sci-fi, futuristic, almost post-apocalyptic type world. Pre-apocalyptic, I suppose, whatever. I'm not ruining the film. But you'd normally expect a score for a film like that to be really intricate and electronic and gritty and I don't know what the word is, but sharp, I guess, with lots of transients, and it should be very jagged. And yet what you actually have is one of the most beautiful natural church organ scores, and it just works. It blows my mind that it shouldn't work, but it does work, and that juxtaposition that Zimmer got into the film just it blows me away. Not to mention the fact that the film itself is great. I really like the plot, the acting's fantastic, and the whole sort of climax at the end is a real thinker, and I love that. So yeah, I'm going to say Interstellar. However, also sound design wise and score wise, I really liked Netflix's Annihilation. There are the key moments towards the latter part of that film I won't ruin, because if you haven't seen it, get on Netflix and watch Annihilation. Really good film. Obviously different budget, different everything to Interstellar, but there are certain parts of the sound design in the latter part of the film that I just felt were real standout holy fuck moments. So yeah, I love that. For me, The Expanse always triggers some inspiration. Do you know what? I'm not sure if I've seen The Expanse. I feel like that's one that has been on my... I have the worst memory ever, in case none of you haven't worked that out already. Oh, okay, it's a TV series. I could have sworn it was a film, so that shows how bad my memory is. I definitely haven't seen The Expanse then. In which case, I might give that a go. Is that Amazon Prime, is it? Cool. Okay, I might give that a go. I'll be honest, I kind of steer clear of everything Amazon Prime for their TV stuff. Yeah, I don't use any of it. I don't watch any of it. Mostly because I don't like the GUI interface. It doesn't work for me. I also really don't like the fact that they stick adverts on something that you're paying for. I also don't like the fact that with Amazon Prime, not all of it is covered under Amazon Prime. So when you're looking through films and whatever, you might see 10 films and you finally, or you're scrolling for half an hour, let's be real, and and you finally go, okay, this is the one I'm going to watch tonight, and then you click on it and it goes rent for whatever the price is, and you're like, for fuck's sake, it's not even included in Prime. So yeah, that puts me off. And I did mention, was it last week, I think I mentioned Amazon Prime documentaries just make me want to vomit, because they're all full of conspiracy theory crap, and I'm just not into that. So yeah, I for that reason, anything that Amazon Prime do, I'm unlikely to watch. Like, I did try the Grand Tour, but that was shite. And I've heard there's a new show, is it called Brothers or something, on Amazon Prime, which apparently is amazing, and I just don't get around to watching it. Anyway, there we go. Cheers as always, Dom. Love these AMAs. Congrats again, and hope you managed to get some sleep. Yeah, just about, thank you. P.S. Loving your tonal display playlist, and especially pleased to see Rival Consoles on there. Erased Tapes puts out a lot of music that I love. I'm a big fan of Niels Fram, Fanboy in particular. Yeah, 100%. I do like a lot of Niels Fram. In fact, I've just started compiling yesterday the next playlist when I refresh it. Actually, I wonder if you guys would be interested in having like an archive, because what happens with this tonal display playlist is I update it every 2 or 3 weeks with about an hour and a half, 2 hours of new music, and I delete the old playlist and just refresh it with a whole new hour and a half to 2 hours of music. So if you do have Spotify, please do go and follow. It's free. If you've got a free account, you can still listen to it. You just have to listen to it on shuffle. To be honest, I don't pay any attention to the order of the playlist, so you're really not missing out on anything if you've got the free version of playlist and a free account. And that's kind of why I'm happy to just do what I do. But on that note, what I've been doing, because I'm selfishly building this playlist for myself, really. And what I've been doing is instead of actually just fully deleting them to never be heard again, I'm actually putting them on a private archived playlist, because that's just growing and growing every couple of weeks. So let me know if you'd be interested in hearing that and just having that as a playlist. I don't know, because I don't really know how everyone else listens to playlists, but I know that all of the playlists I follow on Spotify have a complete refresh every few weeks or so. So that's kind of how I run it. But actually, I would quite like it to just grow and grow, and I can hit shuffle. But yeah, there we go. That's that. So yes. Next, Sunset86. Hey Dom, helicopter, high five. Okay, so I'm going to have a sip of coffee here. Okay, so I have another Mixdown question this week, and hopefully not too long, but I'll try and explain as best as I can. I know you've already explained in previous videos about sending, receiving audio mixdown stems with effects, e.g. reverbs and delays, baked into the recording if it is part of the sound. My question in relation to this is as follows. Is it the responsibility of the producer to EQ or process the sounds before adding the reverb or effects that are baked in? Or do you, as the mix engineer, add EQ and process the sound in the mixdown, even with the effects already baked in? Sorry if this is vague, but I'm struggling to understand this. Okay, that's a good question. And there's no right or wrong answer, if I'm honest. So the thing is I think it's your responsibility as a producer to make any creative decisions. A mix engineer should treat a piece of music not as creative art, but as a piece of scientific research. It should be treated scientifically by an engineer. And by that, what I mean is, if you want your lead synth to have loads of boomy reverb in the low mid frequencies, then you need to EQ that in or out or whatever. If you feel that your lead synth reverb is too boomy in the mid frequencies, then you need to EQ that out before it hits the reverb or whatever. From an engineer's perspective, it's kind of tricky. I think an engineer will see that as, let's stick with the lead synth is too boomy in the reverb. If it doesn't sit in the mix amongst all the other instruments very well, then an engineer will treat that and EQ it out or sculpt it or sculpt something else so that it fits in the mix. And that's what an engineer will do, is to make sure that everything fits and sits together in the mix. But an engineer won't necessarily make the creative decision. So it's kind of a tricky one to get across. A better example maybe is things like compressors. If you want your kick drums to really pump against the hats and snares or something, and you want everything to be completely over compressed, you can't not compress it and send it to the mix engineer and expect them to just over compress your drums, because that mix engineer won't have known that that's what you wanted. To me, that's a stylistic choice from a producer, and so it's the producer that needs to either over compress it and work it like that, or tell the mix engineer, I want these sorts of drums, and the mix engineer might turn around and go, yeah, you can't really do that with these drums, or they might turn around and go, I know exactly what you mean, not a problem. So it's kind of a judgment call, and this is why I always tell my clients and any of you guys watching this, it's up to you to build a relationship with your mix engineer as well. It's not a simple customer service situation. You're not buying a product off a shelf. You're giving somebody your creative work, and they're treating that creative work with processes that you may or may not like, and that's okay to not like an engineer's work, but you need to be able to build a conversation and let the engineer know, I'm not happy with this bit, or I am happy with this bit, or I want it to sound like this, or I want it to do that. so that the engineer knows exactly what it is you want to achieve at the end of all of this. And I think that's really important, that that relationship is maintained. If you just send an engineer a track and they send it back to you and you go, that's not really what I wanted, well, they can't read your mind. So that's my view as an engineer. So in answer to having your effects baked in, I always say just have your effects however you want it to sound. At the end of the day, if a send channel of reverb, for example, if it's in fact, I'm just going to hit reset on the camera because I can see it's about to stop itself. Okay, where was I? So if you've got a send channel of reverbs and delays, and you send a track to me to do a mix down, I think so long as you're happy with those sends and delays, reverbs and delays, then that's good. But if you're thinking, oh, there's too much bass or not enough bass or whatever, then you need to adjust that. But you might think, oh, I need to scoop out all the low end of this, and then you send me the mix. It's also my responsibility to go, why is there no low end in this? And to maybe question what you did, and then go, actually, can you send me another stem with the low end left in, and I'll scoop it out because I'll know where it needs to fit. So again, a lot of it comes down to a two-way conversation. So there isn't really a right or wrong answer when it comes to that. So yeah, there we go. Let's say I have a pad string sound I like and decide I want to add a hull reverb and widen it. Should I do any pre-processing before I add the reverb, or do I just leave you as the mixer to just EQ it as it is with the effects? So I would say just leave it to the engineer to EQ that. If you're happy with the pad string whatever sound and you want to chuck a bunch of reverb on it, just chuck a bunch of reverb on it. It doesn't really, I mean, this comes with some caveats, but generally speaking, it doesn't matter whether you EQ your synth before the reverb or after the reverb, generally speaking. So long as your levels are okay and you're not, so long as your instrument isn't completely lopsided, so long as it's within certain thresholds, which most people it's going to be 99.9% of the time, it's going to be within those thresholds. So I'm not even going to tell you what those thresholds are, because it's just going to be so rare that you're outside of those thresholds that it's not worth covering. So generally speaking, I would say just chuck on the reverb. If you want reverb on that, you don't need to do pre-processing, because you can always EQ. If there's a spike at 200 hertz in a string pad that you feel is just way too low and muddy, it doesn't really matter whether you put reverb on top of that first or afterwards, because you're still going to get an equivalent reverb on whatever that spike is, so you can EQ it out afterwards. It's pretty rare that it's going to be outside of thresholds that are acceptable anyway. Some sources say to EQ before adding effects, but if I'm getting it professionally mixed, surely the mix engineer takes care of all of that. Sorry if I haven't explained properly. Yeah, so I think this is the bit where the internet really doesn't help people, because if you're mixing it yourself, then EQ before adding effects if it needs EQing. The other thing is, what they're not telling you is how much EQ does it need? What EQ? What's wrong with the frequencies? What's the situation here? So without any actual direct examples, then it's impossible to tell. Because like I say, if you had a 200 hertz spike on some strings or pads and you threw on some reverb, and the reverb was, for argument's sake, let's pretend the reverb covers the whole range. There's no filters on the reverb, so it covers the whole range from 0 to 20k. And you've got a 10-second decay time on your reverb. Then you're going to get a 10-second decay time on 200 hertz and a 10-second decay time on the rest of the string pad. So if you EQ out a little dip at 200 hertz before the reverb, fine. And if you do it after the reverb, it's exactly the same result. You're not changing things. However, if you have, again, for argument's sake, reverb on a kick drum, I'm not sure why you'd have that, but let's pretend you have reverb on a kick drum and the kick drum is smashed to 0 dB and there's a huge cut, let's say at 40 hertz, and now I need to EQ in a spike at 40 hertz. Well, your signal is already smashed at 0 dB, so for me to put a spike into the EQ, I'm going to go over 0 dB and it's going to distort. So that's why I'm talking about certain thresholds that really, you're not going to do that. But I mean, that's a silly example, but I think you get what I'm saying. So yeah, people on the internet will say the safest thing, and the safest thing is to EQ before you put in your effects. The reality is a little bit different, that actually the chances of you crossing that threshold or doing that wrong thing is so slim, I just wouldn't worry about it. So I would say it really doesn't matter. Also, this is another thing, I'm going on a rant again here, but also this is another thing that bugs me, is that people on the internet will tell you about the character of a compressor and the character of a reverb unit and whatever. And while I don't argue with that as a concept, yes, most compressors and most reverb units do have their own character. They've got their own tone. They have their own features. And I 100% accept that. However, counter that with the question, if I've got 20, 30, 40 layers of drums and percussions and bass lines and melodies and counter melodies and arpeggiators and risers and crash cymbals and impacts and everything going, this huge track of 30 or 40 stems, and I'm using one reverb on one layer of one synth, is the listener going to go, oh, I don't like the character of that reverb in that little synth hidden in the background? No, they're not. Nobody gives a shit what kind of reverb you're using. So you may have an SSL compressor or something, and great, good for you. But is anyone really going to hear your tom drum that flicks once every bar and go, oh, that must be an SSL compressor on that tom drum, it sounds so good? No, not really. So I think these things are more important for maybe mix engineers, definitely mastering engineers. They stand out, they have character because you're adding that character to the entire track. But at the production stage, it kind of doesn't matter. So going back to bringing EQ pre or post processing with other effects, it really doesn't matter, especially if it's on a stem. Like you say, a string pad, chances are you're lacing that in sidechain, you're probably chucking on loads of reverb. It's not an actual orchestra recording. You're not looking for that beautifully clean sound. You're not looking for that one little violinist inside the orchestra to stand out. You're probably making an electronic dance music track of some sort where everything's just thrown in and smashed, so it really doesn't matter. So context is everything, especially when you're looking up production techniques on the internet. So that's my advice, really. So there we go. I'm confused.com and want to hear from an actual mix engineer. Yeah, so I would say, as a mix engineer, if a client sent me a mix and all the stems needed a bit of EQ and some of them had reverb, some of them had delays, I couldn't care less. Wouldn't even notice that. It wouldn't even cross my mind that, oh no, I can't do this, I can't EQ this now. Wouldn't even cross my mind. I'd just EQ it anyway. So there we go. Wouldn't be a problem. And if it became a problem, like I say with that crazy example of a kick drum and reverb, if it became a problem, I'd come back to you and go, can you take that reverb off for a sec? I need to just do some stuff and I'll apply the reverb myself. It's not a problem. Thanks again, Don. PS, perhaps if you ever get time, maybe make a video explaining everything you require as an engineer for client mixdowns. Have a great weekend. Well, that's the tricky thing. Also have a great weekend yourself, but that kind of is a tricky thing to do. Maybe I can try and do a video outside of these AMAs on what to do there. But actually, the reason it's tricky is because it's actually quite simple. 24-bit 48K WAV. I want to be able to load the stems into a project file where they all start at the same place. Tell me the BPM and the key just in case. And I want to be able to load them up into my project file and basically hear the track exactly as you heard it the last time you pressed play. That's basically all I want. If I need anything else, I'll ask. That's basically as simple as it gets. So there we go. Moving on, Zombo. Hey Dom, excuse me. I see you using Ableton Live. Have you tried 10 yet? Yeah, I had Ableton Live. I forgot about that. It was on my screen last week. I was filming some tech tips for Sonic Academy, and I know that the vast majority of Sonic Academy users use Ableton, so I tend to use Ableton for that reason. Even though the tech tips really I want to do in Bitwig because I prefer Bitwig and you can do way better stuff in Bitwig, but I'm very aware that the user base of Sonic Academy are more Ableton inclined, so I try and do that. However, I probably will do some Bitwig specialist ones at some point soon. So in answer to your question, have I tried 10 yet? No, I haven't. I did cheekily ask Ableton if they wanted me to have Live 10, and if so, can I get an NFR? And they offered me some sort of a discount, and I thought, I don't even use Ableton other than making the odd video, or if a client wants me to do something to their project and they use Ableton. Beyond that, I don't have a reason to have Ableton 10, so even if it was £20, I still wouldn't buy it because I have no reason for it. So there we go. I have a question. Are you aware of Audius? Found it through Deadmau5. They are taking on SoundCloud. Would love to know your opinion. Have a great weekend. No, never heard of them. Audius. Unleash your music. Discover and stream up and coming artists. So I assume it's, I'm not going to click on it right now, but I assume it's basically SoundCloud, if, as you say, they're taking on SoundCloud. I never got on with SoundCloud too well. I felt like their business model just didn't work for me. You know, I'm never impressed with sites that basically let you do half a job for a free account, and then if you actually want to see stats or anything, you have to pay. I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out just to see stats for money. So yeah, so I did pay originally with SoundCloud, and then I realised I don't even look at the stats. I don't care about the stats, so so I stopped paying, and I now use the free account on SoundCloud. And to be honest, I don't see it lasting much longer because, first of all, you can't upload mixes without getting copyright takedowns, which is fine. If you're infringing copyright, you're infringing copyright. Who am I to say that we should be allowed to essentially pirate stuff? But that just means that I'm not going to upload a promo mix to SoundCloud, basically. And that's that. And I don't care about... it's not that I don't care about the copyright strikes or anything like that, or copyright ownership, but actually I don't care about owning it myself. I don't get any money. I don't make any money. It's a free streaming thing, and it's a promo mix. I'm not uploading other people's music as a whole thing. Generally, it's re-edits and whatever. And if there are royalties or money to be had, they can have it. I don't care for that. But there is no model in place for SoundCloud to do that I'm aware of. Maybe there is now. You've got subscriptions and streaming stuff and whatever. I don't know. So there's that. But also, I felt like Facebook killed SoundCloud as well, because Facebook always throttled links to external websites. And I think I've covered this a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned about the infinite scrolling stuff of Facebook and Reddit, for example. That infinite scrolling that we all love. Clicking a link to another website is something we don't do very often. And Facebook have done quite well with certain newspapers where you can embed articles so you can click on it and it just loads inside Facebook, and that's all well and good. But things like YouTube and SoundCloud, they should definitely be embeddable in Facebook, but they're not for some reason. A reason that I'll never really understand. I kind of understand with YouTube because it's a competitor, but SoundCloud is not and was not ever a competitor to Facebook. However, the reason I never got on with SoundCloud was because I felt like you upload a track to SoundCloud, you post that SoundCloud link on Facebook and Twitter and whatever, and nobody listens to it because nobody sees the link, because Facebook throttle that link and they don't want their users to be clicking to external websites. So that kind of killed SoundCloud for me. I just felt like there was no point if I had, I don't know what I had, say 1,000 followers on SoundCloud and say 10,000 on Facebook, and I would post a link, so the 1,000 on SoundCloud, you'd absolutely expect them to get a notification or something in their feed because they follow me. Why, that's that. So you'd expect, say, 10% of them, so that's 100 people, and 10,000 people on Facebook, you'd expect maybe 25, 30, 40% of those to be on Facebook that day and therefore get some sort of a notification in their feed. So, you'd expect maybe, I would expect some of those to share it maybe. So mathematically, you'd expect, realistically, across 11,000 people, you'd expect maybe 500 plays on SoundCloud. The reality was I would post it to 11,000 people and it would get maybe 20 plays, 30 plays. It didn't equate to anything. So it just meant that there was no promotional value to using it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, to me, SoundCloud just wasn't ever a thing I needed, and less these days. So as for Audius, I've not looked. I will look because you've mentioned it, but the chances of me using it is incredibly slim because I have no need for it. I kind of feel like if people want to listen to my music, there's Spotify. I'm not one for offering sneak previews to stuff very often either. I know some people constantly offer, work in progress. Have a listen to this. This is what I'm working on at the minute. I don't tend to do that. Not for any specific reason, really. It's just not something I tend to do. Yeah, I just feel like it's one of those things that needs to be somewhat rare because it makes it more special. And speaking of that, I will be doing a very special mix for Mousetrap soon, and Patreon subscribers of mine, and it will only go to the members of Mousetrap's Mixcloud and the members of my Patreon account, and it will be a whole bunch of unreleased and unfinished music. So keep your eyes open for that. And that, my friends, I can see Yanis Melis helicopter high five and St. Nicholas helicopter high five, and that is it for this week. I feel like that's been pretty smooth sailing. So to make it to prove that you've made it this far into the video, I'm gonna say comment the word Bodzin, because Stefan Bodzin at Pisgloria for Circle. And by the way, if you don't already subscribe to Circle, I suggest you do. Cercle, I think, Circle, because what an amazing YouTube channel that is. They just do random gigs in random places with amazing musicians. Yeah, so I highly recommend that. Yeah, anyway, that's enough from me. I'll see you this time next week. Cheers.